Many of us have been living with vaccine mandates for months, and they're not going anywhere anytime soon.
The mandates kicking in across the country.
Starting today, you'll need one of these, a vaccine card.
People will soon be required to show proof of full vaccination to do most indoor activity.
So far, most vaccine orders issued by cities and states have been upheld, with judges citing a Supreme Court precedent set more than a century ago when it ruled on a state's smallpox vaccine mandate. But now, cases involving the federal government's power to mandate vaccines are before the Supreme Court, and they could ultimately help decide who has the power to order shots in arms. So here's what you need to know about the legal precedent for vaccine mandates in America and what the Supreme Court is looking at now. Back in 1905, the issue of vaccine mandates reached the Supreme Court when a Lutheran pastor named Henning Jacobson refused to get a government-mandated smallpox vaccine, in part because he said he had suffered seriously from previous vaccination. He sued the state, claiming that the vaccine was dangerous and that healthy, law-abiding people like himself didn't pose a danger to the community. But the Supreme Court ruled against him. Writing for the majority, Justice John Marshall Harlan stated, "The liberty secured by the Constitution does not import an absolute right in each person to be wholly freed from restraint. There are manifold restraints to which every person is necessarily subject for the common good." In other words, personal freedom can be limited, particularly when it threatens the community. Since then, authorities have long implemented public health mandates to try to keep communities safe. Fast forward to today and the coronavirus pandemic. Since COVID vaccines became widely available last year, more than 20 states and dozens of cities have adopted vaccine mandates. And those mandates have largely been upheld by judges appointed by Republicans and Democrats alike, many citing Jacobson. The federal government has also ordered vaccines for a wide range of people, like federal workers and healthcare workers who treat patients on Medicare and Medicaid. And through the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, or OSHA, the administration ordered all businesses with more than 100 employees to ensure that their workers are either vaccinated or tested weekly.
We've been patient, but our patience is wearing thin.
With the federal government taking an assertive role, dozens of states, business groups, and religious groups sued to block the mandates. They argue that OSHA, which is tasked with ensuring safe working conditions, and the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, which oversees government health insurance programs, don't have the authority to issue such mandates under federal law. With vaccination deadlines looming for businesses and healthcare workers, and with legal challenges mounting, the Supreme Court agreed to weigh in with fast-track arguments.
We will hear argument first this morning in application 21A 244.
The liberal justices appeared to support the government's order. And at one point, there was a back and forth about the state's power to police public health, power that was affirmed by the Jacobson case.
If it's within the police power to protect the health and welfare of workers, you seem to be saying the states can do it, but you're saying the federal government can't, even though it's facing the same crisis in interstate commerce that states are facing within their own borders. I am not sure I understand the distinction.
The federal government has no police power.
It does have power with respect to protecting the health and safety of workers.
But many of the conservative justices expressed skepticism about the federal government's power.
It seems to me that the more and more mandates that pop up in different agencies, it's fair. I wonder if it's not fair for us to look at the court as a general exercise of power by the federal government, and then ask the questions of, well, why doesn't Congress have a say in this, and why doesn't this be the primary responsibility of the states?
The court is expected to come to a decision on whether the Biden mandates can be enforced in the coming weeks. To understand what that could mean for millions of Americans, let's call my colleague Brent Kendall. He covers the Supreme Court for WSJ.
Hi, Shelby.
Hey, Brent. He says that even though the cases are being heard on a fast-track basis, the Supreme Court's decisions could have lasting implications.
For now, the court doesn't even have to say with finality whether what the Biden administration is doing is lawful or not. It just has to decide if it's likely lawful.
Okay, so even though they're not ruling on the merits necessarily, it will determine the fate of the mandates.
It will. I mean, the merits is part of this consideration, even though they don't have to issue a full merits ruling if they don't want to. I think it's likely for all practical purposes that what the Supreme Court says here will end this.
Some law professors point out that the conservative-leaning court has not been a fan of expansive federal regulation, instead preferring to defer to the states. For example, it blocked the Biden administration's eviction moratorium in August.
In our constitutional system, the way things are set up is that, the federal government has limited power. So states are typically the first line of defense for deciding how best to protect health within their borders.
Brent says a big question is whether the federal government can overrule states, particularly those that don't want to implement the vaccine mandates. The Supreme Court's ruling on the Biden mandates might decide the fate of the mandates themselves, but it's unlikely it'll move the needle much in terms of the public debate over vaccines. After all, Jacobson lost his case more than a century ago, yet many still hold his same beliefs about individual liberties and the right to remain unvaccinated. So keep your eye on WSJ.com for news of the court's ruling. And if you thought this video was interesting, be sure to subscribe to the channel so you can follow me as I cover more news that's impacting our lives. See you next time.